I'm back. This time, the pre-fight breakdown, UFC 245. Man, it's a great pay-per-view. Really outstanding from top to bottom. Three titles on the line, and the two fights that aren't title fights could be main events for a fight night or co-main events for a pay-per-view. Really outstanding card. Let's start off Uriah Faber versus Peter Yan. Uriah Faber, throughout his career, even before the comeback, even in his prime, is consistent almost to a fault. And what I mean by that is, throughout his career, Uriah Faber, once he hit his prime, was actually at his best, not early on, the only guys he lost to were the best of the best. He never had a bad night and lost to a gatekeeper. He fought a lot of mid-level guys, and he never just bungled and made a mistake and lost to one. Everyone who beat him is elite. But when I mean it's almost to a fault, at his best, with all the opportunities he had, he could never win UFC gold. He could never beat the elite of the elite. The guys who beat him, Jose Aldo, Mike Thomas Brown. Then, of course, you got Dominic Cruz at 135, Renan Barão at 135, Frankie Edgar. And against Dominic Cruz, Mike Thomas Brown, and Renan Barão, he had multiple opportunities to get past these guys. He got rematches in all of them. And never had that step-up performance where he was able to be the best. It just didn't happen. So that's what I mean about his consistency. He was consistently, if he was an 8, he never fought at a 9, he never fought at a 7. He could always beat mid-level guys every single time, and he could never overcome the best of the best, despite multiple opportunities and multiple rematches. So that's what you have to keep in mind whenever you kind of analyze Dominic Cruz, is he's always been at that 8-9 level his entire career. Even though he had rematches and opportunities, he was never able to kind of get over the hump in the UFC, especially. But if you look at the rematches he had, one troubling thing is he always looked worse. Except Mike Thomas Brown, he broke both of his hands. You know, that's not on him. Who knows how he would have looked if he had 2 hands to fight Mike Thomas Brown. But in the 2 fights against Dominic Cruz, the second fight, he looked worse than he did in the first one. Renan Barão, he looked worse in the second fight than he did in the first one. Never got a rematch against Jose Aldo, but that troubling tendency of his to not be able to kind of get the necessary improvements to be number 1, that's just been part of his career. The worst fighter to beat him, probably Jimmy Rivera, who's an excellent fighter. So he comes back, he beats Ricky Simon. Sweet, his first finish since 2014. Great stuff. Now he's up against Peter Yan, who is a fantastic fighter, great boxer, and composed. The guy wins a lot of decisions at the elite level, which to me shows a level of composure and maturity that's going to be important against Uriah Faber. Uriah Faber has always been explosive. His best finishes tend to be on the ground. Great front chokes, great guillotines. Does have some explosive strikes, but when he finishes you, it tends to be on the ground. That's where he's most dangerous, is on the ground. Where he's going to have trouble is Peter Yan is 26, a great boxer with real power, good counterpuncher, and he's been caught in the past when he has gotten clipped. It's when Uriah Faber gets a little too explosive, when he reaches a little bit too far, when he does a little bit too much to try and get at his opponent, he gets counterstruck. That has happened before. Obviously, it happened against Renan Barão. Dominic Cruz caught him several times. So the difference here, when I analyze this, is, of course, he looked great against Ricky Simon, but he's not in his physical prime at all. He's far past that. So a guy who has relied a lot on his explosiveness, on his athleticism, is he going to have the explosiveness and athleticism to take the risks he needs to take against an excellent striker who's very, very tight with his hands and doesn't give you a lot of opportunities and is an excellent counter striker? That's really my question here. I don't expect to see anything we haven't seen out of Uriah Faber. I don't expect him to suddenly explode and become fantastic. He's had so many opportunities to show us something great and be a champion. He had so many shots at the title and wasn't able to win him in the UFC. So I expect we see the same Uriah Faber we have always seen, maybe a little bit slower because he's 40. So is that enough against Peter Yan? This is hard because, generally speaking, in his physical prime, before he retired, maybe a couple years before that, he beats Peter Yan. I think he does. I think his combination of explosiveness, craftiness, and experience is a little too much for Peter Yan. Does he beat him at this stage in his career? I'm going to go out on a limb, although I picked against him against Ricky Simon, and that bit me. I'm really going to pick Petr Yan in this one. I think Uriah Faber at some point takes a risk, makes a mistake. I don't know if he gets knocked out. He's always been hard to finish. I think he gets clipped, and that one costs him. I think Petr Yan is a little too composed, a little too technical, and a little too tight with his strikes for Uriah Faber to take him out at this point in his career. So I would go with Petr Yan in this one, probably by decision, just because Uriah Faber, a tough guy to finish. Marlon Moraes, Jose Aldo. This is a really hard one to break down because there's been so much said about his weight cut. The difficulty for a guy who had trouble making 45, coming down to 135 pounds. How's he going to look? That's a huge question. And also, if he looks fantastic, if he looks great, who knows? He could have another run easily at 135 pounds. So he's kind of at the bottom of a decent-sized hill, and then he's got to climb back at 135. But I think if he has a great performance against Marlon Moraes, he could be right there. Could be a title shot in his next fight. Marlon Moraes, of course, coming up short against Henry Cejudo, he might need a few more to get a title shot. Rematches like that, especially Marlon Moraes, not a huge name, not a superstar in a sense where the UFC will make an exception for him. He's got to earn his way back. Would a fight against Jose Aldo be a big step, a win against him? Yes. But usually rematches like this, unless you have a huge name, you kind of got to get back in line. So probably even if he beats Jose Aldo, he's got a couple more to go. If Jose Aldo has a great performance against Marlon Moraes, he could get a title shot right now. Now, we all know what Jose Aldo brings. And if this fight were up, I would favor Jose Aldo for sure. He still has tremendous speed, still has decent punching power. We saw that against Moicano and Jeremy Stephens. Against Volkanovski, he just didn't pull the trigger and start as quickly as I thought he would. I thought Volkanovski was able to kind of be the bully, kind of take the center, and make Jose Aldo work from the outside. I didn't see the aggression and versatility from Jose Aldo we normally see. He didn't look that bad. He just, came up short against an excellent fighter. So I haven't seen that drop off from Jose Aldo that you would normally get. 2 TKO losses to Max Holloway, of course, a rapid knockout to Conor McGregor. You would kind of imagine, okay, this is the end of his road. He's going to look bad from here on out. I think fighting again in 3-rounders kind of rejuvenated him. He's not fighting for a 5-round fight again. And this fight's a 3-rounder. There are just so many X factors here about the weight cut. If I weren't worried about that, I'd go with Jose Aldo all day. Now, I like Marlon Moraes. I think he's an excellent fighter, incredibly versatile. Remember the head kick against Jimmy Rivera. He has knockout power. Had trouble in his last fight for the title with his consistency. Started great and just kind of fell apart after the first round, which I thought if he kept doing what he was doing, and he was putting it on Cejudo in that first round, and then his consistency wasn't there and ended up kind of falling apart, and Cejudo ended up finishing him. But so I have questions about Moraes' consistency in a fight like this. Very big fight, huge name, Brazilian versus Brazilian. I'm going to just say Jose Aldo, I'm going to kind of flip a coin here and say if his weight cut is good and he feels and looks explosive, I think he has all the skills to edge Marlon Moraes. He just is a little bit better at just about everything. So I'm going to say his weight cut is good, and Jose Aldo, we get a vintage performance and he beats Marlon Moraes. I could be completely 100% wrong. He could walk in there and look like death and get knocked down in the first round. He could have a problem with the weigh-in and they could scrap the fight. You don't know. So I'm saying if Jose Aldo is near the guy who beat Volkanovski, who once again didn't win but didn't look bad, I think he beats Marlon Moraes. So the real question is the weight cut gonna hurt him? I am betting it won't, and that Jose Aldo has enough to beat Marlon Moraes, probably by decision. Amanda Nunes versus Jermaine Durandamy. It was funny to me that Brendan Schaub said, I don't care about the 115-pound division. Because to me, the 115-pound division is the most compelling division in women's mixed martial arts. The problem with women's MMA throughout its history is it's been a one-woman show. If you go back as far as I do, it was Gina Carano. She was it. Then Cyborg beat the crap out of her, and she was it. And then Ronda Rousey comes on the scene, and she's it. Right? So they've added more divisions. But each division is kind of a one-woman show, other than 115, which is extremely competitive. It's my favorite women's division by far because, Weili Zhang is facing Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Joanna can win that fight. Weili Zhang can win that fight. It's going to be competitive. Rose Namajunas very much in the mix. Tatiana Suarez, absolute beast. The issue to me is at 125, Shevchenko and everybody else. 135, Amanda Nunes and everybody else. For years at 145, it was Cyborg and everybody else. So obviously Amanda Nunes went up and beat Cyborg, and that's great, but it wasn't a compelling division around Cyborg at 145. I couldn't tell you the next contender. You put a gun to my head. So that's the difficulty. Amanda Nunes sits atop at 135. Period. End of sentence. Germaine de Randamie, is she a worthy title challenger? Yes. I don't think that Amanda Nunes has any trouble with Germaine de Randamie. The only issue she could have is that Amanda Nunes' strength is also her vulnerability or her weakness. If you watch the Cyborg fight, she walked forward and threw hands with reckless abandon and knocked out Cyborg. What that fight displayed or revealed, highlighted, however you want to put it, is once Cyborg was under duress, she really wasn't slick enough to get out of trouble. Once she got hurt, her only instinct was get back and hurt her. Well, you're starting at a deficit. She's already hurt, and Nunes had the power to knock her out. So in doing that, Nunes herself, if you look at the fight, took a lot of risks. She generally lets her hands float a little bit low. She loads up on a lot of shots. Once she gets you hurt, she marches forward like there's nothing you can do to her. And that's how she does it. And so far, it's worked out. If you look at the Ronda Rousey fight, once she had Ronda Rousey hurt, it was blood to a shark. Throwing a steak in a cage full of hungry wolves. She just doesn't back down and let you off the hook. The problem with that is Germaine de Randamie, very experienced kickboxer, slick, accurate. If Nunes goes nuts, gets her hurt and starts throwing big bombs, Germaine de Randamie could land that counter shot and put her on her ass. Not because Germaine de Randamie is, a harder punch than Nunes, I don't believe she is that Nunes tends to load up a lot and throw big shots. And when her confidence is high, it is sky high. She doesn't believe she can be hurt. Do I think she lands that big punch? No. I think Nunes knocks Germaine de Randamie out probably in the first 3 rounds. But if there is a chink in the armor, it is her tendency to bull forward when she has an opponent under duress. When she has them hurt, there's no stopping her. Until you get clipped in the jaw and get knocked out. And Germaine de Randamie has to find those opportunities to counterpunch. Hard to do, but she can do it. So I would definitely go with Amanda Nunes. And if I'm wrong, it's because she overloaded and got clipped. I don't see Germaine de Randamie out-voluming her. I don't see Germaine de Randamie winning rounds necessarily. It's kind of an all-or-nothing thing. She has to catch her coming in, clip her, and drop her in order to win. I really believe that. I don't see her having the tools to put away 3 rounds in a 5-round fight. So that's my pick, Amanda Nunes. Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski. Of course, Volkanovski coming off the win, as I just said, against Jose Aldo. Volkanovski, squat, short, powerful, good hooks, aggressive, really controls real estate well. He has a lot of good tools that makes him an excellent fighter and a worthy challenger. Max Holloway right now, though, is firing on all cylinders. He really looks great. You look at the Frankie Edgar fight, the Brian Ortega fight. I think those are 2 of the best performances of his career. Against Poirier, he was just fighting a bigger guy, and it showed, and he just didn't have the firepower to hurt the guy. And that was the issue. At 45, he can hurt just about anyone. And he has crazy range, and he has crazy volume, and he has good head movement. Volkanovski is just cut from a mold that makes a good challenger, but I don't necessarily think he gets over the hump and becomes champion. Holloway brings a lot that Volkanovski hasn't quite dealt with yet. I don't think Volkanovski brings a whole lot that Max Holloway hasn't dealt with yet. And the only thing that I thought would stop him was the Brian Ortega fight. I picked Brian Ortega because of that weird interview where he seemed to have some maybe concussion-type symptoms or what the deal was. He seemed a little out of it. And I was wondering if something was wrong behind the scenes. He looked so good in the next 2 fights, Frankie Edgar and Brian Ortega, that whatever it was, he was able to get over it, in my opinion. And when he's at his best and really, fighting top-notch, which he is, I don't see Volkanovski or anybody else beating him right now at 145 pounds. It's going to take some slowing down. Someone's got to crack the code, in a sense, because he does take a lot of risks. He does have that hand-floating kind of style. He relies on his ability to read punches and see them rather than have his hands up where you don't have to see every punch. And he does take certain risks that maybe Volkanovski can take advantage of, but Frankie Edgar, nice, tight, solid boxing, good combinations, and could not touch Holloway. And he had the takedown in his back pocket the whole time that Holloway had to be prepared for. And he got nothing done. I don't think Volkanovski brings that much that Max Holloway hasn't seen. I would say he retains his belt. Now, on to the main event, which I am not looking forward to breaking down because this is a tough one. This is a coin flip fight if I've ever seen one. So, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman. The problem with analyzing this fight is these two guys are so similar stylistically. Not in personality and temperament at all. Stylistically. Okay, Kamaru Usman, standout Division II wrestler. Colby Covington, Division I All-American. Is there a huge difference between that? Not really. It depends a lot on what weight class you're in at the time and all this stuff. There are some All-Americans who are absolutely fantastic. They're in a stacked division. Others are pretty good depending on, once again, the division they're in. I would say they're about comparable in terms of their MMA wrestling. The difference stylistically is Colby Covington, if you saw against Robbie Lawler, he will dive in for stuff from a distance and rely on his ability to wear you down. I'll just hang on to a leg and you'll get tired before I will. So I will go after it and go after it and go after it and go after it and kind of wear you down, much like Ben Askren used to do, until you can't stop the takedown anymore. It isn't a clean, sharp, technical, well-timed double leg. He really doesn't do that. It's more of a hanging on to something until you just go, crap, and you end up on your butt and he wears you down. That's his strategy. I don't know if he does that against Kamaru Usman, who is a standout wrestler. You'll waste a lot of energy underneath trying to get an Iranian on a guy like Kamaru Usman who can scramble and stop that kind of thing and does have a wrestling background in his own right. So that would be the interesting switch, is will Colby Covington change his style around because he doesn't want to play underneath in these single leg Iranian positions underneath on the legs against a guy with real wrestling ability, because he used a lot of gas doing that. Now, Colby Covington may have faith in his gas, but Kamaru Usman has a great gas tank as well. So how they wrestle early will tell me a lot. I think Colby Covington will fight a little more like he did against RDA, which was more upper body. He would throw combinations, get in these clinch positions, and kind of try to wear RDA out, and it worked. I think he does that a little bit more against Kamaru Usman. I don't think he wants to end up in those outside takedown situations. So, the striking. Colby Covington is a volume guy. He throws a million strikes. None of them have any particular power on them. It's the death of 1,000 cuts. He wears you down. Robbie Lawler, that fight was over at the end of the first round. I thought at the end of the second round we'd know how this fight was going to go. We knew at the end of the first round, Colby Covington has got this. Robbie just couldn't find the counter shot, was worn out, and it was over at the end of the first round to me. That's what I saw. Kamaru Usman is a medium range puncher. All right, he's better at long and medium range. Does have more power than Colby Covington, but he's also not a knockout guy. He generally wears fighters down. He generally mixes it up and makes it about the decision. Same thing Colby Covington does. Now, the one thing is, Kamaru Usman doesn't throw as much as Colby Covington, and Colby Covington doesn't hit as hard as Kamaru Usman. So there are slight differences in their styles. Colby Covington will throw a million punches that don't have a lot of power on them. Kamaru Usman will throw a lot of punches that have more power on them. Against RDA, I called both of those fights, and I thought Kamaru Usman hurt RDA a little bit more. I thought Colby Covington wore RDA down a little bit more. But, of course, Colby Covington's shtick, a lot of people don't like it. I don't like it myself, but he has a point. With a lot of the stuff he says, it's like, he's a jerk about it, but he has a point. When he says, he got my sloppy seconds with RDA and Damian Maia, I do believe Colby Covington beat a better version of both of those guys. He got them first. I think the beating he put on both of them, or the losses themselves, took a lot out of both guys. It didn't finish them as fighters, but I do believe Kamaru Usman got, I hate to call it an easier fight, but I think both of those guys were tougher against Colby Covington. I think he got them emotionally riled up, and then he beat them, and that takes a lot out of you. Going through a whole camp focused on this trash-talking guy whom you hate, and then you lose to him, your next fight you're not going to be as good. And so I do believe he has something of a point in that I believe Kamaru Usman, although he had better performances, he had a better performance against RDA. I think Colby Covington had a better performance against Damian Maia, but I do believe those fights against Colby Covington took something out of those guys. But there's just so little between them. They tend to win by decision. They're both, I think Kamaru Usman's a little bit bigger than Colby Covington, but Colby Covington's just as strong. That guy's, I've talked to guys at ATT who said Colby Covington in a room full of freaks is a freak, cardio-wise. In a room full of guys with great cardio, Colby Covington has great cardio. He stands out as just that freak athlete. Kamaru Usman has never had a cardio issue. He's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit stronger, but can he keep the pressure up? Oh, it's a hard fight. And then also you get the emotional aspect of it. Colby Covington's an easy guy to hate. He's an easy guy to dislike. And I've said over and over that when I interviewed him before the RDA fight, it's like a different guy. That shtick just isn't really there, but you got to live by it. If you're going to be that guy on television all the time, and that's the image you're going to project, you got to live with it. You can't say, hey, I'm a different guy in real life. Well, this is how everybody sees you. This is your opportunity to tell people who you are and how you are. And this is how he chooses to present himself. Oh, it's so difficult. I'm going with Kamaru Usman. That may be a personal pick, but I'm going with Kamaru Usman simply because I think at medium range, Colby Covington can't take the risks he was willing to take against Robbie Lawler. Not striking. I mean, with the takedown, he dove in with his head down and ended up in these scramble positions, knowing he could out-scramble Robbie Lawler. I don't think he can do that against Kamaru Usman. So I think his game is going to be a little bit more upper body, which favors Kamaru Usman a little bit. Big, strong guy. And he's going to walk into some medium-range shots. Just like he did against RDA, but RDA didn't have the power to hurt him. Kamaru Usman has the power to hurt him. So I think it's going to be an incredibly close fight. But I think Kamaru Usman is going to score with big punches just enough to bank some rounds, maybe sting them a few times, and get away with a decision. I believe it's going to be close. Very hard to pick. Kamaru Usman by the barest of margins. All right? So I think I'm calling this one post-fight for SiriusXM, but I'll be on afterward to go over everything I got wrong, because I always do. Appreciate you guys. See you later.